At the wedding, the son called the convicted mother a homeless woman, and as soon as she took the microphone, the matchmakers were deaf. All alone, she sat in her house, the old woman. She had worked hard all her life, always making sure her family didn't suffer hardship. But now she was in need herself, and no one from her family was here to stand by her. Alone at home, she gave a soft sigh and looked around her small, gloomy living room. The curtains were half drawn and only a dim light filtered into the room through the heavy fabric. If she could have, she would have stood up and pulled back the curtains a bit to let in more light. But she stood up with difficulty and could only walk slowly. Her strength was dwindling day by day, and she didn't know how much longer she'd be able to take care of herself. She looked wistfully at the mantelpiece of the fireplace, where a small, warming fire was blazing. On it were many pictures of herself and her family. Some showed how she celebrated parties with her family, others how she played with her children, beaming with joy. She remembered those times fondly because each picture told a beautiful story. Hard life. But life had never been easy for the woman. Even at a young age, she had to work a lot and hardly had time to enjoy her youth with friends. But then she met her future husband, and fate led the two lovers to each other. Although they both had little and had to work a lot when they were married, neither of them forgot about the little pleasures of life. They were very happy when she finally became pregnant and had children. Their marriage was very harmonious, with 3 children. She and her husband saved early on to give the children a good education. This paid off as the children went to good schools and studied hard. They got jobs in the city and worked hard to climb the career ladder. This meant that one young adult after another left the parental home and bought his apartment in the city. Gradually, only she and her husband were left at home, and the children came to visit their parents from time to time. In the beginning, such visits were more frequent, but as time went on, they too became fewer. Eventually, they only visited their parents on major holidays like Christmas or birthdays. But even on those holidays, they often didn't have time and the family wasn't always completely gathered at home. All this changed even more when the children had their own families, got married, and had children. The grandchildren sometimes visited the grandparents, but they had no time for that during the school hours. When he died, the world collapsed for them. Everything changed when the family suffered a heavy blow. The woman's husband became sicker and sicker in his older years and often had to go to the doctor. The doctor said his health was bad and that they could not help him much. Although the husband was given medication, it did not work very well either. The wife was devotedly caring for her husband and was very sad and desperate. What could she do? How could she help him? It was long suffering that she followed with a heavy heart and full of sorrow. He was not very old when he died. For her and her children, this was a terrible day because he was a good-natured man whom everyone loved. This man had been loved and appreciated throughout the neighborhood and by all his relatives. Especially for his wife, his death was an inestimable loss because she lost the dearest person who was always by her side. She'd been with him almost all her life, and they had always supported and helped each other. Loneliness increases. From then on, she was truly alone. Her children were there for every second during these first, especially difficult times, but after a few weeks, they left her more alone until finally, she was completely alone in her house again. The rest of the family went about their lives in the city, slowly overcoming the pain, or so it seemed, but that was not true of the woman. She aged faster in the last 2 years than before, and depression set in. Without her medication, she would not even manage to get out of bed on her own. For a long time, she had thought about hiring a caregiver to help her with daily tasks, cook for her, and entertain her. Maybe that way she could overcome her loneliness and depression and participate more in life again. No money. The problem was, however, that she couldn't afford enough money to get a home caregiver. Her pension, which she received monthly, was not very large, and it would never be enough for a caregiver. The old woman knew that sooner or later she would be a burden to her family because she needed help. As long as she could still walk by herself, she tried not to tell her family. She didn't want anyone to have to pay for her expenses. A special day. The old woman sighed and stood up, groaning heavily. To do so, she leaned heavily on the edge of the table and then took her walking stick for support. She couldn't get far without her walking stick, and everything hurt her. Now she slowly walked over to the kitchen to put on some tea. It looked like she would not have any more visitors today. It was already late afternoon, and no one had visited her. Neither had she received a phone call. Yet today was no ordinary day, but a very special one. It was her birthday, but apparently everyone had forgotten it. Today she turned 80 years old. Usually on every birthday she was visited, gifts were exchanged, and she received congratulations over the phone or through letters. This year everything was different. None of that was true. They must have forgotten about me. I'm not important enough for them, the woman thought sorrowfully. After she made her tea warm, she walked back to her living room chair and sat down on it. Great surprise. Just as the old woman was about to go to bed to rest, she suddenly heard a car in the driveway. Doors opened and slammed shut. Then the doorbell rang. Quite amazed, she slowly walked to the door and looked out her window. Her heart beat faster with excitement. Could it be? Oh, dear ones, she cried, beaming with joy, and opened the front door. All her children and grandchildren have come in. Hello, Mom. Hello, Grandma. Hello, Grandma. Happy birthday. She was surrounded by her family and smiling with joy. There were tears in her eyes as she walked into the living room with them all. We couldn't come earlier. There was a traffic jam on the road. Look, we brought a cake for you. Come on, let's cut it. Everyone took a seat around the kitchen table with the old woman in the middle. She also received some gifts. She especially found those of her grandchildren delightful, for they were homemade things for her. They haven't forgotten me at all. I love them, went lovingly through the old woman's mind. Difficult decision. Mom, we need to talk, suddenly her eldest son said rather seriously as they were eating. The woman raised her head in fright and felt queasy. Her heart was beating faster with fear. Were they going to tell her bad news? We can see that you're having a hard time coping with everyday life here alone, especially since Dad passed away. You're so lonely here, too, since you can't go out much. It's become hard for you to live alone, don't you think so? Yeah, it's hard sometimes, but I don't want to be a burden to anyone. And right now it's still going. You don't have to take care of me, she replied haltingly. Mom, you need help. And we're here for that. We want you to be okay. That's why we've been doing some thinking for you. He looked around. Last week we went to several nursing homes, private homes. These are all beautifully bright, and the nursing staff is very competent and friendly. We also talked to some of the seniors. They say only the best of one of these nursing homes because they're not alone there, and they often play cards and other board games. They'll never bore you, and the caregivers all take good care of their needs. Plus, you won't be far from us. So, we and your grandkids can come and visit more often. What do you say to such a nursing home, Mom? He looked at her cautiously. The old woman swallowed hard. I can't pay for that. I've thought about having a caregiver in my home myself more than once, she whispered, ashamed. A precious gift. But Mom will pay for that. It's our birthday present to you for your 80th birthday. She thought she had misheard and looked at the others incredulously. But they all nodded and showed her the documents. She could move in there in a month. The woman smiled through her tears. You guys are so good to me. Thank you. I love you. A retirement of love. A few months later, she couldn't even imagine what it would be like not to be in a nursing home. She found the joy of life again as she was surrounded by many loving people. Every day she played games with other people, made friends, and was often visited by her children. The old woman was now happy and was infinitely grateful to her family. What do you think of this story? Does it get to your heart the same way? Do write us in the comments to share your thoughts with other people. I'm curious.